Hi and welcome to a Republic of Gamers video. We're going to be using hardware from ASUS, Corsair and Cooler Master to build this ultimate gaming PC with the new Maximus VI Extreme motherboard and 3 ASUS GTX 780 DirectCU II graphics cards in 3-way SLI. Before we start, let's look at the motherboard, the Maximus VI Extreme. It features the brand new Intel Z87 chipset and LGA 1150 socket that supports the latest Intel 4th generation Core CPUs. For this build, we're using the top-of-the-line Core i7-4770K CPU, which has an unlocked multiplier, so we can overclock it. To support that overclocking, the motherboard has upgraded power hardware called Extreme Engine Digi+ 3. This is made up of the Digi+ VRM control, Blackwing chokes, NextFET MOSFETs, and 10K black metallic caps. In the corner is the new MPCIe Combo 2 card. This has the very latest dual-band 802.11ac wireless hardware and an NG-FF socket for the new form factor SSDs. Also bundled in the box is the OC panel that plugs into the board to provide a whole range of overclocking controls and diagnostics, such as temperatures, clock speeds, fan speeds, and automatic overclocking controls. You can stand it on the desk or even mount it inside your case. First, we're going to install the CPU. Lift the arm and lid and then pop off the cap. Line up the CPU notches with those on the socket and do not touch the pins as they're extremely fragile. Then gently drop in the CPU and close the lid. Now we need to install the motherboard into the case, but first let me show you why we've chosen the Cooler Master Cosmos II. It's specifically designed for high-end builds and multi-GPU setups, as it has partitioned cooling zones and you can install additional side panel fans directing fresh air straight onto the graphics card. There's also enough hard drive and SSD space to match all 10 of the motherboard's SATA ports if you plan to have many hard drives or SSDs. With the side panel off, we need to install the standoffs in the right place. Cooler Master helpfully labels them on the motherboard tray. Next, drop in the motherboard and screw it down. Here is the Cooler Master Seidon 240M CPU cooler. We've chosen it because it provides fantastic cooling performance and overclocking capacity without going to the extent of fitting a full water cooling kit. Now we'll install the CPU cooler. Thankfully, the Cosmos II has a nice gap on the back of the motherboard tray for us to get behind the CPU socket. Just before we attach the cooler to the CPU though, we need to apply some thermal paste to ensure good heat conduction. Simply put a blob in the middle of the CPU cap and spread it around evenly. Next is the memory. We've chosen a huge 32 GB of Corsair Dominator Platinum DDR3. Note that despite this being 2133 MHz, when you first turn on any PC, it will run the memory at 1333 MHz, so you'll need to go into the UEFI BIOS to enable the higher clock frequency. Simply line up the notch on the memory with the socket and push them in firmly. As we're using 4 modules, put one in each slot. The Intel Core i7-4770K CPU has its own graphics chip built in, but as we're building the ultimate gaming PC, it's time to install our 3 GTX 780 graphics cards. ASUS upgrades them with DirectCU II cooling, and inside it has super alloy hardware that improves longevity and overclocked performance. Remove all these blanking plates first, then plug the cards into the red PCI Express slot. Note that there's still space for an extra GTX 780 or gaming sound card like the Zonar Phoebus if you prefer. In this build we're using two Corsair Neutron SSDs as it's one of the fastest SATA 3 SSDs available. In RAID 0 they'll be even faster as the data is accessed from both at once. While a total of 512GB of space is ample for your OS, apps and plenty of games. As we said earlier, the Maximus VI Extreme has 10 SATA ports, so there's tons more upgrade potential as well. Having both enough power with a stable output is absolutely essential to a PC build, especially as we're running 3 graphics cards. For this build, we're using the Cooler Master M2 Silent Pro 1500 watts, which is certainly enough power for our build. If you add several more hard drives and peripherals, it has plenty of spare capacity. With the power supply installed, we need to plug it all in. As the power supply sits in its own area below the motherboard, the cables need to be routed up behind the motherboard tray to where they are needed. We need to plug the 8-pin CPU power cable, 24-pin ATX cable and front panel connectors into the motherboard. The SATA power goes into the drives and all the PCI Express power plugs go into the graphics cards. Finally, let's plug in our OC panel and then we're all done. To top off the build, we've got the ROG GX1000 mouse, CM Storm mesh keyboard and ASUS MX series monitor, and you'll need to add the cost of an OS to the install too. If you wish to build your own incredible gaming PC, you can see the full spec list in the index underneath the video. Then when you're done, please show us your efforts in the Republic of Gamers forum, as we'd love to see them.